Hello, and welcome to my channel. Subscribe for new episodes. In the quiet neighborhood of Bridgewater, Tennessee, a sense of fear and suspicion has taken hold among the residents upon learning of the murder of Veronica Boza, aged 30, in her own home. What happened to Veronica could happen to anyone, and to restore a sense of security, the detective must solve one of the toughest cases they faced. No confession has been obtained, nor has the murder weapon been found. The investigation into this heinous crime has been met with unexpected obstacles. The killer of Veronica is still out there, driven by greed, jealousy, and revenge, like something out of a Hollywood thriller. Outside the country music capital of Nashville, Tennessee, lies the peaceful community of Bridgewater. It's a refined and tranquil haven brimming with Southern charm. Bridgewater, located east of Nashville, is a closely knit community with new homes that offer all the comforts of affluence, housing many families. The entire area is characterized by safety and peace, allowing us to fully enjoy the benefits of small-town life without the noise of Nashville. For music producer Veronica Boza, Bridgewater was the perfect place to start anew after her separation from her husband, Timothy, following a marriage of 10 years. It was a wonderful neighborhood. As Veronica proceeded with finalizing her divorce, a sense of relief became apparent. Everything in her life was fine. Veronica found Bridgewater to be the ideal area to raise her 9-year-old son, Jordan. The mother and son were regulars at the community swimming pool, where Veronica would lounge and sunbathe while Jordan and his friends played in the water. Veronica was beautiful and intelligent, with a bright future ahead of her. Born in Italy, she came to Nashville, Tennessee, in the United States to fulfill her dream. She belonged to the Italian nobility and always captivated me with her beauty. She was friendly, kind, and well-educated. This charming Italian moved to America and fell in love with American country music, quickly making her mark in the industry. Veronica was a music producer at CMT and had a promising future ahead. She worked on many projects with big stars, had great hopes, achieved successes, but despite her success, Veronica remained humble. She was a religious woman who regularly attended temple and considered her good fortune a blessing. She was very genuine and devoted in her love for her son, never showing any arrogance. Veronica's first love story did not work out, but it seemed that this was about to change when she met the busy mother and seasoned divorcee, Chris Orlando. Veronica and Chris met on a television show called Can and Widow. And since Chris was also a producer, they had much in common, and their relationship flourished. It was a connection destined for them in the paradise of country music. However, Veronica was extremely happy on Sunday, August 10th, during the year when people were returning from the temple. Chris was on his way to Veronica's house, intending to go for a car ride with her that afternoon. But shortly after Chris arrived at the house, he was met with a big surprise. Their plans and lives changed forever. Around 2:30 in the afternoon, patrol officers arrived at the house. The crime scene was quickly secured, and within minutes, seasoned criminal investigator Andrew Angichuk was summoned. The call he received that Sunday was anything but ordinary, directly impacting his colleague, Detective Johnny Crampy. The neighborhood, located about 3 kilometers from my home, is a quiet and distinctive area where crimes rarely occur. At Now and Minutes, the once peaceful neighborhood became the site of a major criminal investigation. The crime scene area was cordoned off with tape to prevent entry, and the streets were filled with police cars and undercover detectives. Neighbors were already standing outside their homes. "There's something in the garage I want to show you." One look inside the garage, and Detective Crampy formed a strong mental image of how he anticipated the crime occurred. The garage door was open, as was her car door, and her personal belongings were scattered on the garage floor as if there had been a struggle until she managed to get inside the house. The investigators followed the path of destruction through the entrance and into the kitchen. No, we found additional signs of a struggle. Items were thrown off the kitchen table, and the window curtain was knocked down beside the side door. I saw the victim lying on the ground amidst a pool of blood in the living room. I noticed that the sofa was moved, as were some chairs and cushions out of place. A fierce struggle took place inside this room of the house. We succeeded in determining that she had been shot several times in the head and body. Her watch was pulled from her wrist, as you can see here. It was a kind of violent crime that always affects you personally and professionally, but it also motivates me because I have a job to do. The investigators immediately got to work. The first thing that came to my mind was whether someone had followed her home and tried to kidnap her. It didn't seem like anything was stolen from the house. There was a safe with several $100s and some checks, all left in place. However, one item's absence raised suspicion. We discovered that Veronica's mobile phone was not at the crime scene or in her car. It wasn't in her purse, so it became a very important item for us, and it wasn't the only item missing from the house. We believe the attacker took the bullet casings and also evidence from the crime scene when he left. As the crime scene investigation unit lifted fingerprints and collected evidence, the investigators turned to the man who reported the crime, Veronica's close friend Chris. "Won't you tell us what happened then?" Chris was very disturbed, as he had planned to spend the entire day with Veronica. Why would he want to harm her? The first thing I noticed was that the garage door was open, which she usually doesn't leave open. He noticed that her car door was open, which was strange, and upon entering the house, he saw her body and called the police. Chris told the investigators that he noticed Veronica was dead, so he didn't touch her body, but they still had to determine his whereabouts before arriving at Veronica's house. He told us he was at a friend's house, then left that house, called Veronica, and planned their day together. He stopped at a local gas station and then called his friend again. When the investigators asked about the son, Veronica's son was with his father, Timothy, her former husband. They had met at the church that morning to hand over Jordan to spend the evening with him. Chris then. Timothy presented the receipts from the stores he visited, as per his statement, and was directed to the police station to provide an official statement. His alibi would remain a crucial element in the investigation until they could verify his whereabouts. I'm not saying you're a bad person, but I am saying that divorce is ugly. It's clear you lost a lot in this divorce. When a spouse is killed, the first person we investigate is the other party in the marriage. My intuition tells me you might have something to do with this crime. I respect what you're saying, it's your job, and I want you to do what you have to do, and I will give you what you ask of me. They pressed him a bit, as he was a suspect being the estranged husband. I've been working in investigations for years, and there's something about you that doesn't seem right to me. I don't know how to respond to that. All I can say is that I didn't commit the crime. Despite their interrogation methods, Timothy never asked for a lawyer and spoke openly about his relationship with Veronica. It was generally a good relationship. There were days, yes, I understand, when my work situation was bad. Those were our worst days. I realized the relationship was coming to an end, so I moved on and started a new intimate relationship. But I also realized that Veronica was becoming much more successful financially, while I had to live with relatives to meet my financial needs. The investigators also asked him about the phone calls he made that day. "Yes, I'm here." Timothy told them he called his business partner and spat at him a few times that morning and said he might have made other calls to his mother. The police confiscated his phone to verify his statements. They continued to interrogate him. "Did you ask someone to go to your wife's house and kill her?" "No, sir, I would never do that." Timothy did not refuse to answer any questions and appeared cooperative. "I'd like you to try to prove my words wrong. I'm ready to help." Timothy agreed to give a sample for DNA testing, but the police still had to verify Timothy's story about meeting Veronica to pick up Jordan. They spoke with another person who saw Veronica alive, Father Joseph Patrick Breen, the clergyman at St. Edward's Temple, who was very saddened when he learned of Veronica's death. Father Joseph Breen, the family's clergyman, what a great loss. You can't help but feel bitter about the person who killed her. Father Breen informed the investigators about that morning outside the temple and Veronica's last moments with him after the Mass. It was a Mass held at 10:30 in the morning and ended at 11:20. She left with Jordan to the parking lot and handed him over to his father, Timothy. "How are you? Here's his bag. It has all his stuff." He said it was usual for Veronica to meet Timothy after Mass to exchange custody of their son. She had been doing it for several Sundays, and that's what happened that day. Timothy's story about the meeting was confirmed. As the investigators continued to interview witnesses, the news of Veronica's murder quickly spread among her friends and colleagues in the music industry. The reaction from the television and music community was to come together, as is usual here in Nashville. Country music stars and workers were shocked, feeling the loss. Everyone from studio workers to stars drank their sorrow. Nashville residents care for each other. The music community is interconnected and supports its members in sadness and loss. On the second day of the investigation, the investigators returned to Greenbrier, hoping to confirm Timothy's alibi during the time of Veronica's murder. In the quiet Bridgewater neighborhood, the detectives were piecing together the timeline of the crime. Timothy, the estranged husband, was initially a person of interest. He provided a receipt from a grocery store in Greenbrier, which, along with the store manager's testimony and surveillance footage, showed him shopping at the time of the murder. This alibi placed him away from the crime scene, gradually clearing his name as a suspect. Attention then shifted to Chris, Veronica's close friend. He claimed to have been at a store on his way to her house. The detectives verified his presence there through an employee's statement and a receipt, aligning with the time he called emergency services. This made it unlikely for Chris to have committed the crime and disposed of the evidence in such a short time frame. The investigation turned to the missing phone of Veronica and the calls she made that day. The detectives requested the call logs of Chris, Veronica, and Timothy. A specialist in cellular systems, Andrew Valley from the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, was brought in to analyze the phone records. Veronica's calls didn't raise any suspicion, but Timothy's records showed repeated calls to a certain individual before and after the crime. This individual, Cory Keam, had a criminal history of a sexual offense in Oregon and was on conditional release. The discovery of Cory's criminal past raised new suspicions, prompting the detectives to delve deeper into his potential involvement in the crime. The detectives reached out to Cory, asking him to come to the police station. He declined their invitation, but detectives Johnny and Andrew persuaded him to meet at a nearby location, hoping to uncover more about his connection to the case. Cory agreed to meet the detectives in a parking lot, as he refused to come to the police station. "If you don't mind, we'll only take a few seconds of your time, and then we'll be on our way," they assured him. "All right, no problem," Cory replied, taking a seat. "Please, start from the beginning. When you spoke with Tim that day," they requested. "I remember calling him that morning to talk about the weekend," Cory recounted. "We usually update each other on how our weekends went and share news about our lives." Cory mentioned he was returning from Kentucky, where he had left his girlfriend and stayed with Nikki, another close friend. He insisted he was with her the entire time, but the detectives pressed on, questioning the validity of his alibi. "This situation isn't good at all," they warned, emphasizing the seriousness of the murder investigation. "I have nothing to do with the crime," Cory protested. "I knew Veronica before I knew Tim." The detectives knew that Cory had lived with Veronica and Tim for a while. "How's it going, Veronica?" They would greet each other, indicating their familiarity. Cory claimed they were just friends, but the detectives wondered if there was more to their relationship that could have led to him targeting her. They tried a bold strategy, asserting they were sure of his guilt to see if he would take the bait. "Listen to what I'm telling you, man. There's a lot of physical evidence at the crime scene. There's a neighbor at the end of the alley with a security camera. When we go back, we'll get the tapes," they threatened. Despite Cory's suspicious behavior and agitation, the detectives lacked concrete evidence to arrest anyone. However, Cory's past criminal record, filled with assaults on women, couldn't be ignored. They asked for his consent to take a DNA sample and photograph him, but he refused. They also asked to see his phone, which he claimed was stuck in his car in the parking lot, and denied them access. The detectives warned they would issue a search warrant to obtain a DNA sample, take photos, and search his car. They obtained the warrant and forced Cory to provide a DNA sample. The police also confiscated his car, where his phone was still trapped, and sent it to the forensic lab for examination. Yet, they still had no clear motive for why Cory would want to kill Veronica. They considered jealousy, anger, and greed. There was a wide range of motives that could lead to crime. Later that day, the detectives contacted Cory's girlfriend, Nikki, to verify his alibi. Detective Crampy spoke with her over the phone and convinced her to meet him in a parking lot of a nearby shopping center. "He was at home when I returned from work around 4 o'clock, she confirmed. Nikki provided a solid alibi for Cory, stating they stayed at home all Sunday, and she even made him a sandwich while the murder took place. A week after Veronica's death, mourners gathered at St. Edward's Temple in Bridgewater. "Thank you for being here this morning to remember Veronica," they said. Veronica's funeral was well attended, with many people from her music industry colleagues to friends and family coming to say goodbye to a dear friend and a loving mother to her only son. I saw Veronica's son, Jordan, close to his father, looking very close. Blessed be Veronica. Timothy moved through the crowd normally, conveying a sense of loss and pain that we all felt. Timothy's friend Cory was not present, but among the mourners was Chris, Veronica's close friend. Everyone silently wondered who could have committed such a heinous crime. There were those who harbored suspicions about the perpetrator, feeling sadness and sorrow. I believe there was an element of anger and bitterness. Perhaps we looked around the temple and wondered if that person was here. Is Veronica's killer present in this hall? The case investigators were also there. Detective Crampy and I attended the funeral, observing the attendees in the parking lot to see who would come and who would show emotion. The funeral ended, but the residents of the area couldn't wait to find out who the killer was. The community had confidence in the police officers handling the case, but they wanted answers quickly. They wanted to uncover the truth so they could move on with their lives and mourn Veronica's loss. The investigators also hoped to find the killer for professional and personal reasons. Detective Angie Chuck and I felt immense pressure from the community and our employers. I asked my wife and son not to go out on the streets. My wife is the same age as Veronica, and our children are the same age as her son. Like her, we belong to the religious community, so this crime directly affected us. Once again, they turned to Special Agent Andrew Valley, who was gathering cellular data from Chris, Timothy, and Cory. We were checking the cell towers their phones connected to determine their locations at the time of the crime. The phone records of Chris and Timothy confirmed their statements. But when Agent Valley examined Cory's phone data, he found something striking. Cory's phone was on the interstate highway near Veronica's house, connecting to the tower adjacent to her home. One thing I noticed immediately was that Cory was near the crime scene at the time we believed the crime occurred. Cory's alibi was falling apart, and with Agent Valley tracking his movements that day, his story became very suspicious. On the morning of the crime, he was at his girlfriend's house in East Nashville. Then he drove to an area near St. Edward's Temple, and his phone connected to the tower there for a long time. After that, Cory's phone headed to Veronica's house and then to East Nashville, where his girlfriend Nikki lived. But the most significant discovery was that a second phone followed the same path. Veronica's mobile phone was picking up the tower's signal on the same route that Cory's phone was taking to Nikki's house. Veronica was trying to lead us to the killer. This information could ruin Cory, but it wasn't enough to make an arrest. Mobile phone data has a margin of error of about 3 kilometers. Moreover, Nikki stuck to her statement about Cory being with her at the time of the crime. Detectives Crampy and Angie Chuck needed to solve the puzzle of the conflicting data. Well, when we're in a situation where the technical data and witness statements don't match, the investigator has to work harder to try to figure out why, they decided. Before they concluded that they had to re-interview Nikki, she preempted them with a confession. On September 11th, Nikki contacted the investigators. Nikki, on her own accord, reached out to the detectives. "Yes, it's me. I was hoping we could meet. I need to talk to you both urgently," she said, wanting to confess and tell the truth, no longer wanting to be entangled in the murder case. "I can come to you at the police station," she offered. Nikki changed her story about what happened on the day of the crime. She admitted that she lied in her initial interview and that Cory was not with her the entire time as she had claimed. "I don't know where he was," she revealed. The new story suggested that Cory could have committed the crime. Nikki told us that she had worked all night and was exhausted. She went home and fell asleep. When she woke up, she noticed that the key to her bus was missing, and so was Cory. She went back to sleep and later woke up to start her day when Cory arrived. She seemed relieved but a little scared of Cory and wanted to offer her help when she learned that Veronica had a son and wanted to assist in the investigation. The police confirmed that Cory had been lying, and now they needed evidence to link him to the crime scene. It turned out that Nikki could help provide the murder weapon. It was reported that a gun had been stolen from Weston Price, Nikki's husband. Nikki confessed that she took the gun and placed it in a red food cooler, which she put in her bus. She said she took the gun for self-defense, and it was the same caliber as the one used in the crime. She thought the gun was still hers, but now the gun was missing. The detectives released Nikki on the condition that she would help them again when needed. They immediately contacted Weston Price, Nikki's ex-husband. "This is the place," they said, asking Weston if he had used the gun, to which he replied affirmatively. He owned a farm in South Tennessee where he had used the gun, and there was a possibility that the bullet casings were still there. "We shoot here every time," he said. Crampy and Angie Chuck searched the farm, hoping to find bullet casings that matched those found at the crime scene. It was the conclusive evidence they needed to link the gun to Veronica's murder. After half a day of searching, they were fortunate to find the bullet casings, which they took to the forensic lab in Nashville. At the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation lab, the police found the evidence they needed when the bullet casings matched the casing found at the crime scene. It felt like a moment of truth. They still needed evidence to link the gun to Cory, which they obtained from two sources. First, they found a picture of the gun on Cory's phone. Then they spoke with Cory's neighbor, Eric Pollan, who said Cory had brought him a gun similar to the one in the pictures on Cory's phone. He said he had cleaned the gun, which was inside a red food cooler, the same cooler Nikki had described to the police. They succeeded in proving Cory's possession of a gun of the same type and caliber as the one used to kill Veronica. They now had enough evidence to arrest Cory for Veronica's murder, but he had gone into hiding. The detectives turned to Nikki to help lure him out of hiding. They have a bullet of some kind that matches those found at the crime scene. "When are you supposed to leave town?" "I have to go with you. I have to do something, Cory. They're coming to arrest you." The phone call allowed the police to locate Cory and arrest him. But the puzzle was not yet solved. "Stop, Cory," they said, about to unravel a mystery that seemed straight out of a Hollywood movie and would surprise the entire town. 3 weeks after Veronica Bose's murder, the police were close to proving the charges against the suspect. Cory Keam, the primary suspect, convinced his girlfriend Nikki to call him so they could pinpoint his location. "I'm scared for you. You need to help me right now. Listen, all you have to do is go somewhere and hide. If they're looking for you, go somewhere they're not looking," he instructed her. When Cory spotted the police closing in on his hideout, he said something no one expected to hear. "The police have arrived, my dear. Listen carefully to what I'm going to tell you. Call Tim and inform him of what's happening." Cory tried to warn Veronica's estranged husband, but he didn't realize that he had just pointed the finger of suspicion at his friend. The police now had a reason to direct their attention to the man few people thought was connected to Veronica's murder, Timothy Bose, the father of her son. The investigation began to interrogate those who had a working relationship with Tim and knew he was struggling financially. When they questioned the financial planner of the wealthy Bose family, he told them about an uncomfortable conversation he recently had with Timothy. "I just wanted to check on the insurance situation," the financial advisor said. "He told us that Tim came to him during the funeral and asked about the life insurance policy. Let's talk about it next week," he suggested. It seemed obvious that Tim was having financial problems and needed this conversation. This gave the police the motive they needed to escalate the case to Assistant District Attorney Thomas Thurman. I think he believed this would solve all his problems. He would get custody of his son, revenge on his wife for leaving him, and a large sum of money, Thurman speculated. Timothy was arrested on suspicion of murder and interrogated again, this time with his lawyer present. "We're here to follow up on the statement you gave us a few weeks ago," they said during their second interview with Tim. His lawyer urged him to tell the truth. "I didn't know what to do. I'm sorry. I lied to everyone here, and I admit it," Timothy confessed. The truth turned out to be like a script from a Hollywood movie, in fact, directly taken from Hollywood. "I saw a movie years ago starring Billy Crystal and Danny DeVito called Throw Mama from the Train, where both had terrible wives, and one said, 'Let's do that switch thing.' I thought we should do the same, and it seemed like we were just joking, and there was no prior arrangement," Timothy explained. "My first reaction when Timothy explained that the crime was based on a movie was disbelief. It was absurd. Timothy claimed he never expected Cory to go along with it, but he told me he did it. She tried to escape and she resisted. But if Timothy's story was true, why hadn't he told the police before? But if we had executed it, I would probably have given him the money," he pondered. Both men stood trial for murder. During Cory's trial, Assistant District Attorney Thomas Thurman presented the prosecution's version of events that they believed happened on the morning of August 10th of the year. Veronica took her son and headed to the temple, intending to hand him over to Tim. Cory parked his car in a spot overlooking the temple. After the service, Veronica gave her son to Tim and drove home. Timothy went to the store to create an alibi, and Cory followed Veronica home. He turned off his phone before reaching the house. Cory had followed her home, where he suddenly attacked her in the garage, frightening her as she got out of her car. It's likely she resisted in the garage and managed to escape into the house. Oh my God, she left her bag and tried to run for safety, the narrative concluded. As soon as Veronica entered her home, Cory overpowered her in the living room and fired several shots to cover his tracks. Cory took the bullet casings from the crime scene but overlooked one, which turned out to be a crucial piece of evidence. The most significant oversight was taking Veronica's phone, which allowed his movements to be tracked to the apartment of his girlfriend, Nikki. It was discovered that Cory stopped at the temple and threw her phone in a dumpster. However, what was surprising is that Cory did not dispose of other evidence. When the police confiscated his car, they found a large black burlap sack containing gloves, a food storage box, a black hat, a piece of military-grade cloth, and a blue tarp. Traces of gunfire were found on these items, which had distinctive characteristics and further linked him to this type of ammunition. Cory was found guilty of first-degree murder and armed robbery. His girlfriend, Nikki, testified during the trial, but she was not convicted of involvement in the murder. Cory was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 25 years. 8 months later, Timothy was also found guilty of premeditated first-degree murder. Timothy was sentenced to 25 years in prison for his involvement in Veronica's murder. Veronica's close friend, Chris Orlando, was completely exonerated of any involvement in the crime. The motives behind this crime were many: revenge, hatred, greed, and jealousy, akin to a Hollywood movie. The town's reaction to this news was mixed. Some residents were relieved that the charges were proven against them and that they would be imprisoned for the rest of their lives. However, another part of the population was shocked and deeply saddened by Timothy's involvement in his wife's death. When people learned that Timothy had orchestrated the entire murder, they were stunned, as no one expected Veronica's husband to do such a thing. Perhaps the greatest tragedy is that the life of a young boy has been marginalized. There are many tragedies, but I believe the greatest tragedy is that Veronica can no longer be a mother to a child she loved so much. The neighbors in Bridgewater resumed their daily routines, but their comfortable, peaceful lives will never be the same again. Indeed, such a crime destroys a community by robbing it of its sense of security. Mixed feelings overwhelm me when I look at the house. I remember the happiness that once graced the place, and then I remember the tragedy that occurred, and I can never forget what happened.